It's like
Welcome
turning like,
everybody. Yeah,
hi,
we love talking about our morning beverages.
I love it.
So welcome everybody. Today I have Haley Raymond here.
Hi.
Haley is an amazing PR specialist, and I've
You.
been working with her on my new book, Right for Money and Power. And partially, I brought Haley on not only because she's just amazing, and I just think she's fantastic, and I love her, and I think
Thank
she's
you.
just like a great PR specialist, but also because so many authors who are self-publishing books, even if you're going the traditional publishing route and you're looking to get more PR firepower, we just don't know what we don't know about PR and promoting our books. And so,
Aw.
Haley, thank you so much for joining. I would love to hear a little bit about your background, and our audience would love to hear a little bit about your
Okay.
background and how you got into PR.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you again, Amy, for having me. I'm so excited about this. And hello, everyone. Thanks for joining. Yeah, so it's been kind of a long road, I would say. I'll give you the short version. I went to journalism school. I'm an elder millennial, so I grew up with like Carrie Bradshaw's of the world in the hills, and I was like, I'm going to be a fashion journalist. And as life happens, I kind of, you know, changed. Things just changed, and I decided to. I'm from Missouri, so I stayed and did some. I was a magazine editor. I started at editorial assistant, like very bottom of the ladder. So kind of worked for two regional magazines as a magazine editor, and then just so happened my boyfriend at the time, my now husband Chris, he got a job in Belfast, Northern Ireland, which was a bit of a plot twist. But we were very excited. So when we moved there, I was just kind of ready for something new. I knew I wanted to be in the media and communication space. So I kind of applied kind of all over, and I got an interview at a PR agency, Morrow Communications, which was great. And they kind of took me on and kind of taught me a lot about PR that I knew the journalism side and the writing side, but I hadn't learned like the PR side. So from then on, I went to work with another agency, a brand agency called Smarts. So I was in Northern Ireland. I got to work with some really cool brands. Like I got to like go to Belgium and Copenhagen and do some really cool stuff. And then flash forward, COVID, we got homesick, moved back to the US. And then I had my first child, and I wasn't ready to go back to a 9 to 5 job. I really was like, how can I, as you guys probably know, how can you make freelancing work? So that is how we've gotten here. So I started kind of doing a lot of just like random stuff, and I've really just earned media and publicity and promotion, and PR is really my passion. So that's really where I've narrowed my focus. So so I work with cool people like Amy that are doing some really exciting things. And yeah, so that's a long story, but that's what got me here today. Yeah.
That's awesome. And I think what I really appreciated when we met for the first time is that your journalism background, I think, is such a cool kind of like piece of like what you do in PR, because
Thanks.
with like the earned media component and trying to figure out like how you work with clients, it's like having that journalism background like helps you understand like what the other side wants to see, like what
Yeah.
will get that attention. And I think that that's been so invaluable as I've been working with you, and like as you've been pitching the book and like starting to get those like early media bites. Like it's so cool that like that you were like no, like this like letter to podcast like needs to be shorter
Oh
because
yeah.
the
No, I was thinking that was kind of harsh. I was like, this is too long.
no, no,
Yeah.
because like that's like the knowledge that I think is so helpful, because like when I was like for my first book, Six Figure Freelance Writer, I
Hmm.
was like personally like emailing podcasts and being like,
Yeah.
"Hi, would you have me as a guest?" Like
Yeah.
I would write like 8 paragraphs long to like have like some podcasts invite me, and like it like I didn't get very many invites, but like with you, like you're like it needs to be short. We need to do this. Like having that
Yeah.
like insight, especially because I can feel that's coming from your journalism background, and so I think that that's a really kind of like unique part about what you offer as a PR specialist. So I would love to kind of get a sense from you about like
Mhm.
what do you feel like is like the number one thing that like your clients have misconceptions about PR coming in, and then
Mhm.
potentially like what maybe authors might not know about PR that you think that would be
Yeah.
helpful for them to like understand that you would love to kind of clarify.
Yeah. I think luckily all the clients I've worked with have been quite savvy. But I think there are some kind of what I come across a lot of time, though there's a couple of things. So I think one is that some people think that I think in movies and TV, there's like this idea of like the publicist who just like picks up the phone and is like, get this story and like, and that's really not how it is. Like it's really like relationships are important, but it's really about like yeah, as you said, like knowing what journalists want and like also kind of being a bit humble about yourself. Like, really, yes, you wrote a book, but like, what is the actual like a lot of people are writing books, hence hence this call. So like what makes you stand out? So I think that is just important that if you do decide to work with a publicist, you need to be a little bit realistic about, like really what is your story? And it's really the publicist's job to work with you, but it's like the news is not that you wrote a book. The news is really about like what is special about this book? Why are you writing it now? So just know that like publicists aren't magicians. Like we work with you in collaboration and to really get the coverage and to get interest from media. Um, and I think also another misconception is, or not really a misconception, it's more of sometimes I think it's not totally thought about. I think from so I do mainly PR and under PR is quite a big umbrella. So under PR, my specialty is really earned media. And so that is your pitching, like pitching. I do pitching all day long. So it's like pitching podcasts, pitching Substacks, pitching your more like legacy media. And so and it's called earned media because it's hard. Like it's because you're not paying for it. You're kind of trying to convince someone or really, I shouldn't say convince. You're helping media like find story ideas. So it's hard, it's earned when you get a coverage. I still get so excited when I get like coverage for a client, even that's like my whole job. But like, because it's like you've really worked hard and you've really like you and I have like talked about like what is our messaging and that kind of thing. So I think but that being said, you can't control, like I can pitch all day long and share photos and share a press release, but really it's up to the journalist for the final story or it's up to the podcaster for the final edit. So I think that is something that sometimes, as I said, I think sometimes people think that publicists can just kind of like say like, oh, like change that quote or like, can you just like add the website here? Like that's if you want to do an ad, you have that much control over. But from PR, you can't, or you shouldn't do that. That's unethical to like be telling a journalist what to do. So yeah, so that is just, I think that's my misconception too, is that sometimes, or not really a misconception, but more of like, until you're in it, if you want to work, even if you're doing it by yourself, like you just need to realize that like you cannot really control, the journalist has the final say on what comes out. And so most of the time it usually is positive, but like, sometimes, or there'll be like a small like typo and they'll be like, why is it wrong? And that kind of stuff you can fix, but it's just to know that the journalist you do not have control of the final product. And I know that can be scary for some people, but that's why you work with people like me to try to get it as close to what you want as possible. And just to help the journalist with like messaging and that kind of thing.
Yeah, what I really liked when we first met is that
Mhm.
you talked about how like PR is like a slice of the pie. And it's
Yes.
like how like in order for like a launch, like a book launch to be successful, it's like you need to have like your social media. You should
Mhm.
have like, or the thing that I always am telling people is like, especially writers, is like you should be writing on Substack because if
Yes.
you're writing on Substack, then you're building your community and you have like a natural group of people that are interested in what to read what you're writing. And I think PR is such a nice kind of like slice of that because
Mhm.
it kind of is like bringing in eyeballs that otherwise wouldn't have found you. And I think that
Yes.
that's like the piece of PR because, and then another thing that nobody talks about with PR or not enough
Mhm.
people talk about with PR is the impact on SEO and GEO. And
Yeah.
so I've had clients recently, I've had some discovery calls with clients that are like,
Mhm.
I inputted like all of my files of my rough files of what I want for my memoir ghostwriting book. And I asked Grok, who should I hire as my memoir ghostwriter? And Amy, you came up. And I'm like, cool. I like that's amazing.
Yeah.
And
And
but the
that's
reason
wild.
why
Yeah.
I came up in like Grok and ChatGPT is because like I've had help with like SEO and then also
Mhm.
past media that has like boosted my name in search results that has led these like AI tools to like rank me. And so like that's why it like made so much sense to like invest more in PR because it like
Mhm.
if you're a freelancer and you have a book and you have a Substack, like PR can just kind of like be that extra like boost on top to get
Yeah.
you ranked in AI search engines, which is so huge right now.
Mhm.
And a lot of people are like converting more through AI search engines because it feels like a biased third party source. And if you're doing research on ChatGPT, you're more likely
Mhm.
to go through. Um, but
Yeah.
my next question for you is like, what are your kind of like is your specific approach to PR and book
Mhm.
promotion? And I especially would love like for you to like share a little bit about like that early process that we went through that I
Yeah,
loved, where you were basically helping me shape like the storytelling and the
yeah,
messaging around the book launch, which I think has been amazing and so helpful to kind of like create that context around a book launch. And so
mm,
would love to hear like how like you would love for you to share your process because I think it's helpful for people to understand like the role of a publicist in shaping that book launch
yeah.
and like the pieces around it.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and thank you for your kind words, Amy. Yeah. So I actually really love the beginning of like any project. So my in really any PR program, whether you're launching a can of soda or like a book, it's really thinking about like, right, what are we doing? Like what are your goals? Like what are you actually so like for a lot of people writing a book, it's A to sell the book, but it's also to promote yourself as a credible like yourself. Like you want people to know who Amy Suto is as well and that you've written this book. So I think like for us, like we talked about like it's really about what do you want to say? So obviously you have a whole book that talks about it, but really as in if someone were to never read that book, like what do you want people to hear from you? So it's really about talking. So first, you should always, what is your main goal? Like, why are you writing this book and why do you want to promote it? So that it seems like an easy question, but um, it's just like, what is your actual purpose? And then also, who are you talking to? So, like, Amy, you like really nailed down who you're talking to. I think sometimes if you're anything with communications, if you don't know who you're talking to, that is a problem. Or like, because like some people be like, "Oh, I'm talking to everyone." It's like everyone is not a audience. So it's like, are you? Because that also, because the reason I'm saying this is also, um, like who you're talking to is very important about media consumption. So like, say you're targeting Gen Z, obviously they're going to be TikTok's more important for them and like social media is more important. Say you're targeting baby boomers, then they're more likely to be like watching cable news or on Facebook, so there's just that is really why it's important to A, who you're talking to, and then because I really think that um as far what was your question about approach? Or sorry,
Yeah,
what's
they
your
like
next question? Sorry.
process, like
I just
kind of
started
like just
talking.
like process, like because like
Yeah.
I think that like structure of like how especially the beginning works with like
Yeah.
working with clients. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think so A, know who you're talking to, and then that really helps. And then also what you wanna say, but that also really helps shape, like because I also think a lot of people are distracted by, like, the shiny object. Like, so it's like, "Oh, Threads is new, I need to be on Threads," or My son really loves TikTok, I need to be on TikTok." But it's really about, like, where are you gonna get the most bang for your buck? And then also, as you kind of alluded to earlier, like, what are you already doing that, like because right now it's really about it used to be that you could just, like, send out a press release and, like, get a few hits, and it would be like, "Oh, great." Like, but now it's more about there's just so much media and so many channels that it's more about, like, being omnipresent for that, um, for your audience. So, like, millennials, I think that it's like they have to see something, like, 8 to 11 times before they even consider, like, purchasing something, and that they also, like, I know I target millennials a lot. So millennials, like, they like to hear about things and they like to review things before they make any purchase. So, it's really just about being in more than one place, but also not being you don't wanna spend like, TikTok is quite a big investment for a lot of people, like because there's just so time investment, I mean. So there's just so much content. So, like, well, if you're targeting baby boomers, like, why are you spending a lot of time on TikTok? So there's kinda like that kinda thing of thinking about, like, right, where do we actually want to put our efforts? So, like, for your book, for example, we talked about, like, obviously pitching, like, news and legacy media and then also podcast because it's really about that niche. Because yours, obviously, you're targeting writers, so it's like, where are writers hanging out? So it's like, they're reading news, they're listening to really, like, writer podcasts, and then also, like, the wider creative and business community. So kind of where do all of those merge? And then that's really, like, your sweet spot for where you want to be promoting it. Yeah, so I think the process is really just about, like, what are your goals? What's your audience? What do you want to say to those people? Like, and then also what do you want them to do? Like, you probably want them to buy the book. So it's like, like, think of you wanna make it easy for people. So if they like or even, like, if we're talking to media, like, I know we talked about, like, having, like, a shorter link, like, it's like amysuto.com or no, amysuto.com/power, I think is
Yeah,
for your
yeah.
book. So, yeah, so it's like things like that, that just to like have all your ducks in a row before you go out to media. The other thing is photography. A lot of people don't talk about photography is very essential. If you don't have a good photo of yourself or your book, that is bad. So just always have like a nice headshot, even if it's like taken in your backyard. Like you need to have photos. So that's another thing people don't often think about. Like everyone knows about a press release and everything, but photos I'd say are even probably more important than a press release these days, just because we live in like such a visual world on our phones. So um so that was a very long answer to your question, but
No, no, and I
yeah.
think that like what I really loved like when we were working on like the documents, like you had created like in Canva like a beautiful like image about
Oh,
you
thank you.
you like pulled in my like headshot and like a photo of the
Yeah.
book and like for journalists to like for that like really visual like here is like everything that you should know about the book and like it was really cool to see like how visually like you were thinking about things
Oh,
and like
thank you.
even when I saw the press release for the first time I'm like wow this feels very legit and I think that
Yeah.
like having the help of your help with like crafting like I think that the because I'm still in the finishing like stages of finishing right for Money and Power and so
Mhm.
working with you I think made the book better because in
Oh, thank
us
you.
working together like I was
Yeah.
able to get even more clear of like what do I want people to take away from Right for Money and Power, what do I
Yeah.
want people to like what messages do I want to make sure really come across and then in my last I promise last house of rewrites right now
That's okay. It's
like
fine.
I'm like really kind of taking that to heart and so I think that
Yeah.
like I do
Good.
think that, like, I've heard from other people as well that, like, working with really good book marketers and book publicists, like,
Mhm.
help to make the book better. So it's like bringing
Yeah.
like PR specialists on earlier in the process can be really helpful because they can really shape that messaging and maybe even shape the book. And so I
Yeah.
think that that's like really really important.
Yeah.
Um, you already kind of started to talk on this, but I think that like when I initially like started coming into like thinking about like hiring a publicist for my book, I
Mhm.
wasn't sure like exactly like would that also include podcasts and Substacks?
Yeah.
And I kind of had like a little bit of like an older version in my head about like what does a publicist do and
Yeah.
what is PR, and I was like, oh, newspapers.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so, but then when I like started to do some
Yeah.
research and we were talking, like I was like, oh wait, this is like all encompassing and really holistic, especially your approach. So would love to hear
Mhm.
like how you feel like PR has evolved and what is like the modern version of PR
Yeah.
and like the modern like what is your role now that like probably like maybe was different a few years ago or like this job is like was different a few years ago. So would love to hear
Yeah.
about like these multi kind of like platform approach to PR that I think is
Yeah.
really kind of unique.
Yeah, and I could talk about this all day because it literally changes all the like, I'd say even in the last 6 months, like, because I mean, podcasts have been around, like, since, like, I was first like 2013, but I just feel like it really goes back to who you're speaking to. So, like, say and who what your goals are and, yeah, who you're talking to. So, but so when first started in PR, I was, like, basic and I was, like I was, like, a what do you call it? Communications executive. So I was, like, the one, like, pitching, calling journalists, like, all day. So that was like, I spoke to them on the phone, like, which I would never like. So I think COVID also changed a lot because it used to be that journalists were in like one room, in like a newsroom. And so you would always just pick up the phone and talk to them and like do your kind of elevator pitch on the phone. And sometimes they wanted to hear from you and sometimes they did not. So that was just a good experience. But yeah, I think and it also used to be that people would just pick up press releases like as news stories. But so I think, so it's just changed exponentially. Because the publishing world is just evolving with different business models. So, like there used to be a lot more print media to target, but obviously that is changing. I think also like even in the last year, or really I'd say since the election. I mean, podcasts have been around for a while, as I said, but I feel like they've kind of taken on a new relevance, I think, and a new legitimacy. I think it used to be kind of like, oh yeah, I'm on a podcast, but now I feel like you see, this is probably a weird example, but like The Bachelorette, I don't know if the girl from
Yeah, Taylor
Secret
Frankie
Lives of
Hall. Yeah,
Walter.
yeah.
Yeah.
I
So
secretly love that show.
yeah, I know, me too. We'll talk about that later.
Yeah.
But like, so she announced that she's going to be the Bachelorette on Call Her Daddy. So like,
Mhm.
quite, or even like Kamala Harris went on Call Her Daddy. Like, you see, I think the legitimacy of podcasts, especially, have really taken off. And because I think now you see, yeah, like president, or even Donald Trump went on like multiple podcasts, and it's like that's wild, that like from as someone who was a journalism major and like really loved newspapers, like it's just changed so much since then. So yeah, so I think that was something. And so I am still a big believer in legacy media. And when I say legacy media, I mean like you're like the kind of like the famous publications, like, your New York Times, your Forbes, those kinds that now really have more of an online presence, I would say. Um, but I also am also a believer in like local media. I've just seen it firsthand. Like there's one client that I work with another as part of a wider agency, and there was a GoFundMe link was mentioned, and you could see the donations go up, like, just as a result
Whoa.
of that. Yeah, so, like, I've seen that, like, it really does work. Like, I'm not just because I make money. Like, it just, like, I've seen the power of it. So I think I do believe in legacy media, but it's really about who you're targeting, and I think, yeah, as back to podcasts, like, I think when we had initially talked, you were kind of thinking like, like what, like magazines and that kind of thing. But in my mind, it's like, yeah, that's one part of it. But like, and that just can be a little bit more of a slow burn. And I think it's really about like, we're seeing like great traction with podcasts already, which is super. So I think it's really about who you want to talk to. Because like podcasts, for example, that's like the most trusted medium for millennials right now. So, I think when we think of PR, we typically think like newspapers or like a broadcast interview, but it's just so much bigger than that now. And it's really about going to where your people are. Um, and so, yeah, I do think the podcast, especially, I've just seen such a change even in the last year about like how like it used to be that they were kind of always secondary, like, they were always kind of like, "Oh, yeah, he's on a podcast," but, like, that's not the same as, like, getting in, like, the New York Times or something, but really that's changing because I think you've just seen such even, like, Taylor Swift, going on her boyfriend's podcast, but there's just, like to just get so many viewers, that, like, some of your legacy media aren't seeing, so, um, yeah, so I think it's really just think about more of your where your audience is spending their time versus like what's like the like cool. I mean, it's great. I mean, I have seen people like if you like get something in Forbes, for example, like people are really impressed by that. But it's also that there's other things too. It's like you don't want to just hang your hat on those kinds of publications, because you really want to target those very engaged audiences, and a lot of those audiences are hanging out like communities like this, like Substacks, or listening to really niche podcasts. I think you talk about that in your book too, Amy. Like spoiler alert about like how you really want to like target those really engaged audiences instead of just kind of like the general public and hoping that those engaged people are listening. You really want to. It's more of just like kind of efficiency. Like if you're on a writing podcast, you know that the majority of the people listening to that podcast are writers. So it's really just like I would say it's more quality over quantity. But yeah, it's just
Definitely.
evolved so much. I could talk about
Yeah.
it all day.
No, no, I think this stuff is really interesting, and
Yeah,
a lot of people don't fully think about it because, like, 2
yeah,
years ago, I was on, like, this what a pretty, like, mid-sized, like, podcast show,
yeah,
and I still get people today who buy my book from that podcast and message me and
but
join,
yeah,
like, Writing Your Job, and, like, 'cause they're like, "I heard
yeah,
you talking about your memoir ghostwriting on this podcast," and it's so cool to get connected with people who, like, were found me through this one podcast interview I did 2 years ago, and so
yeah,
I do think that like staying power of podcasts is
mhm,
huge, and I think I like what you said because I know when we initially had met, you were talking about how millennials have more trust in podcasts,
mhm,
and I think
yeah,
this is the piece that a lot of people don't think about, which is building
mhm,
trust with your audience, and
yeah,
if you're an unknown quantity and nobody knows who you are, and they see, like, an ad for your book across, like, a sponsored ad on social media, like,
mhm,
are they gonna really trust you? But if they hear
yeah,
an hour-long podcast about you talking about your philosophy, why you
mhm,
wrote this book, who this book is for. Like, I do think that that's way more powerful than buying an ad in some cases,
mhm,
depending on like what your book is, and like you said, where your audience is.
yeah,
And so, because it's like sometimes ads perform really well if it's like this is a romanticy book, and I'm reaching romanticy readers with
yeah,
like Instagram ads and like this. So it's like certain types of books and certain kind of like niches. Like people see
yeah,
an ad, they're like, that cover looks cool, that concept
yeah,
looks good, ads will
yeah,
work. But I think for nonfiction books, especially,
Mhm.
like PR is so essential because of what you've done such a great job is like
Thank you.
kind of like thinking about like the newsworthy kind of like elements of like how does
Yeah.
this why is this important now? Why is this book,
Yeah.
why is this author like writing about something that is kind of relevant now?
Mhm.
And I think that like definitely like PR can also like with certain types of fiction that is timely, like I think that
Yeah.
that is like super important too. And so I almost think that like you like let me know if this feels right, but I feel like that your job as a PR specialist is kind of like you are like the meta storyteller. You're figuring out like how the book
Yeah.
like the story around the book coming out in the real world. Like not like kind
Yeah.
of taking like the pieces and being like this is why this is going to impact society and
Yes.
why people should
Yeah.
care. Like does that kind of like resonate with you in terms of like the
Yeah.
storytelling that kind of comes into your job?
Yes, 100%, because I think for 2 reasons. I think that people from a purchasing consumer, like, people buy from people. They want to hear stories. You As you said, so, like, advertising, the best really launch campaigns have kind of, like, all what we've been talking about is, like, like, they have their social, like, I think the best you see that the best brands or the best people, like, you'll hear them on a podcast, you'll see an ad, you'll see them on social. It's like you just kinda hear them in, like, the ether. But I do think storytelling is a huge part of that, and I think also from a media want to hear about, um, stories. Like, that is what is, like, because I back to my journalism background, I got some horrendous pitches, like, some, like, horrible ones, and, like, I just remember thinking, like, the people that have their story together and, like, that they know really what they're talking about, because that is really what's interesting to people. People don't just they're a journalist is not, I mean, unless you're, like, Michelle Obama, like, they will write a news story that you wrote a book, but it's really about, like, what is the story behind that? Because yeah, a story, especially right now, we just, like, I feel like everything we do right now is storytelling. It's, like, on social media, on Substack, you want people to engage with your content and not just see it, like, because it's like your Substack, it's like you share it, but, like, you have your writing boards, but you also tell, like, behind the scenes. That is really what people love, as opposed to just being, like, broadcasted an ad or, like, buy my book, buy my book. It's really about, like, the story behind it. And yeah, and also, like, why is it relevant now? Because I think that A is why people would buy it now, and also why media care about it now. So that is a thing, like, if you for people that are interested in, like, working with a publicist, that is really what you should be talking to them about, like, right out the bat, is, like, what is the positioning? What really is the story behind this? Because as I said, there are a lot of books out there, um, and so it's really about drawing people in, like, before, like, what is the story behind it? And so, like, your story about, like, Amy, how you came from Hollywood, like, it's just really an interesting, you've had just, like, an interesting journey, so that's, like, important to share. But yeah, no, storytelling is super important for any media, really, right now, from your own social to Substack to media outlets.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
how would you say like when writers are like, okay, I think I want to work with a publicist on my book,
yeah,
what would you say is like the important things that writers for need to keep in mind that in starting to work with a publicist in terms of like, here's some things that you should think about. And you mentioned one, which is like the
mm,
story of like why you were writing the book. Are there
yeah,
any kind of like other things that you as a publicist like want to hear from your clients, like when you're starting to work together of like, okay, I want to know about like the crazy piece in your backstory or your lowest
yeah.
moment, or like, are there any things that you're like, okay, this is what you need to do to get the most out of working with a publicist to get like the best chance for your book, your brand to like really pop off? Like, these are the
Yeah,
things that I want to know.
yeah, that's a good question. I think one thing just to think about ahead of time is that, this relationship, like, our relationship, it's really, like, you have to be ready to, like, give time to it as well. Because, like, yeah, I know I had given you, like, a questionnaire to, like, fill out about your audience, so it's really just about, like, yeah, giving me all the information that you can, and really thinking about, like, yeah, what are your main goals? Who are you talking to? Yeah, why are you writing this book now? But also being willing to put in the time, so, like, you'll need to be available for interviews, like, you'll need to be available to review press releases or review, like, assets that we wanna send to media. So it's really about, like, also, like, being as I said, publicists are not magicians. Like, it's a collaborative effort. So I think, yeah, but I think anything about your story is really interesting because, as I said, people buy from people. They're not going to, I mean, obviously, you want to have a cool cover and everything, but people are going to buy, especially like people like yourself that have kind of built a community. They like know you. And so you want other people to know you too and like know your story. So, yeah, I think coming prepared with that. But on the other hand, like, it's also part of my job to like pull that out and like see what the story is. Like, you were very prepared, I would say, than like some other people. But I think it's also my job to like ask those questions and like, um, yeah. So I would say like, I don't want people to feel like they have to like have all this like paperwork done before they talk to a publicist because it's also the publicist's job to like think about that, to help them think about that too. But I would say like the basics are like really knowing what your goals are, who your audience is, and then really what you want to say. Like, yes, you wrote a book, but like think about like the wider context and like why should people be buying this now? And why did you
Totally.
write it now? Yeah.
Totally. No, I think that's great.
Yeah.
So we're kind of getting to the end. So if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to drop them in the chat and let us know. But as we're kind of like getting to wrapping up our conversation, and thank you,
Mhm.
Haley, for joining. Like it's been
Oh, of course.
amazing to have you here.
Oh, thank you
I
for
just
having
love
me.
I like just love like being able to like pick your brain about your process because it's like
Oh,
this is so
anytime.
new to me, like kind of
Yeah.
moving into this. But I think that like just kind of like zooming out, I think it'd be helpful for our like the readers, like the writers in our audience to know like what is kind of like the big picture process of like working with like a publicist on their book. So like what was kind of like the like what is like the zooming out like what can people expect how far in advance should they start working with a publicist
Mhm.
like what kinds of things should they know about like the big picture process because we've talked about how like you're like building
Yeah.
story and pulling things out of it but like timeline wise and just like big picture process wise
Yeah.
what should writers know.
I yeah, that's a good. I think from a timeline, I do think the earlier the better. I think for your book, I think it was like 6 months out.
Yeah,
So I think yeah, I mean, you don't want it to be too early, like because I know like you're almost done with the book. Because I think ultimately you also want to get the book in hands of like journalists or podcasters. So I would say maybe like maybe like 6 months, but also like say you haven't. Um, Say you're like 4 months now and you're like, "Oh, I wanna do a publicist now," like, that's still like, you can make it work, but I think one thing also is, especially with if you're not a household name, which is most of us, like, you my approach, like, with your Amy, it's like your book, Amy, is to, like, go to media a few times. You don't wanna just like, "The book's launching next week, like, what do you think?" Like, we need to kind of prep them a little bit before because they might not know who you are, so you're a fairly new entity, so ideally, we wanna be, like, pitching them a couple times before the actual launch, before the actual I mean, as for the book is actually available. Yeah, so I would say maybe, like, 6 months would be ideal, but that being said, I think it could be kind of a concentrated timeline. Um yeah, so I think really just as I said, I think if you're interested in working with a publicist, like, I think just come to them with, like, what you have, but I would say, like, earlier is better because also, like, what we were talking about, like, the messaging, like, you can't just, like I can't start pitching, like, just the day after, like, like, I'd say, like, at least a month or 2 of prep to make sure that really I mean, and that can be like a truncated timeline, but, I would say to really get the most bang for your buck, I would say, like, at least a month of prep. So just think of that as well.
totally. Especially I feel like
Yeah.
that the prep that we did like was so clarifying for other parts of my
Yeah.
book marketing that I think that it was so valuable. And
Yeah.
I think that like the nice thing about self-publishing is you could definitely move fast, but you don't want to move
Mhm.
too fast. And I think that
Yes.
like having at least like 3 to 6 months before your book comes out of like
Yeah.
proof campaigns, like doing stuff,
Yes.
like I think is like really important. But
Yeah.
Miss Larissa asked, is there a doc to start the process of drawing out your story, a template or questionnaire? So you have a great template and questionnaire,
Yeah.
Haley. So I'd love to hear a little
Yeah.
bit about kind of like how you like how you put that together, like the because you were very intentional with the questions you asked. You were
Oh,
also
thanks.
like I was really impressed by like the level of detail that you would like checked out every all of my like my websites and everything, and you were and really specific to draw things out. It almost felt like, and I know I'm a memoir ghostwriter, but I almost felt like I was being interviewed by
Oh,
a memoir ghostwriter through your questionnaire. So like
oh, yeah.
what in the like the questionnaire kind of process when you're getting to know a
Mhm.
client, like what do you do to like in the prep stage with that?
I think that's where my journalism background comes in. It's kind of like if you were writing a memoir or writing a story about someone, like what do you want to know? So I think if someone is thinking about it like for themselves, like what is your background? Like what has brought you to this moment? And also what makes you a good so it's like whatever you're writing about, why are you writing the book as opposed to someone else? Like what are you bringing to the table? Like what makes you an expert? I would also think about like anything. So that's really for your questionnaire, it's more of like what are your goals? What is your audience? Who are you? Like a bit of your bio, what makes you stand out? I guess it's kind of like what makes you different than another book. So like say you're talking about running. Like why is your book good about running and what makes you special about running versus another running book? I think also things trying to think what like also anything that you have already, like yeah, like what's like have you written a book before? Have you been on other podcasts? Also like what is your dream like if you could get on a dream podcast or a dream media outlet, like kind of think about that. Also I think another thing was who are your competitors? So
Mm,
who are people that you really admire? So I think it kind of sometimes examples can be very helpful, especially when you're working with a new specialist because it it helps to visualize like what you actually want to do. So I think having examples, like knowing who your competitors are, but also who people that you admire that you're like, oh, I really like what they're doing. Yeah, just really, really, the more information you can share, the better. I would say, really, anything you want to
awesome.
share is helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No, I completely agree, and I've just seen
yeah.
how much you've taken everything I've shared with you
Oh, thanks.
and like put it into like a really great like campaign and like targeted the right podcast. Like it's been
Oh,
very
thank you.
impressive.
Oh,
So
thanks.
thanks for your question, Miss
Mhm.
Larissa, and then we'll just move on to this last question that
Sorry,
we
that's a
have.
long answer.
No, 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 no. This is all good. Um, uh, April Cruz asks, I worked in a PR agency for over 20 years ago as an admin, and press releases were the thing.
Yeah,
Lately, I've been hearing that they aren't as important, which I don't understand because it can bring
yeah.
free press. What is a must in PR now that isn't a part of traditional PR?
Yeah, that is a good this is a hill I will die on. I really think that press releases are very important. Some people will say that you don't need them. I think yeah, so I guess to answer your question, um I think going back to podcasts, I think that's really something that it used to be like I think press releases used to be more like you write a press release and you hope that it gets picked up. Whereas now I think a press release, that does still happen, but I think a press release also it can be a really important background document. Like I think especially for your book, Amy, um it gives more information. I just remember journalists are just very overworked or podcasters as well. They're getting so many pitches. So any way you can make it easier for them. So I still believe in the good old press release. It's also from the GEO perspective that like ChatGPT having a press release on your website can be very helpful. Because I mean as we were saying, you really want to be across channels. So your own channels, like your own website. Like I know Amy, you had like an announcement when we send out the press release at the same time. So that is also so I would say that even though it's evolving, there are still traditional PR elements that are still like the bread and butter. Like I still believe in a press release. I still believe in like, like a good, even like a short bio, like a short boilerplate. So yeah, I believe that the press release has actually kind of had a little bit of a renaissance because of ChatGPT, because it's written in a very clear way that machines can understand. But I'd say you could pitch a podcast, like podcasts, you don't really need a press release to pitch them. So that would be something that I think is a little bit different. And like, as we said, like we did a one pager about you, which is a little more visual. So that would be one thing, but it's like, I guess the through line is like people just want like a good story. So however you want to convey that to them, that's really the important part. But yes, I still believe in the good old trusty press release. So I will believe that until I die. But yeah, but I'd say that they're just really the channels and who you're targeting is really, I think, what has evolved the most.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
think that's really interesting. And I hadn't even thought about like for AI, like web
Yeah.
search tools like ChatGPT. Like people are relying on ChatGPT and Perplexity for searches like more than ever.
Yeah.
And like and
Yeah.
they're trusting the responses they're getting and going to the websites that these like AI search
Yeah.
tools are recommending. And so I
Yeah.
didn't even think about that. Yeah, that's really smart.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Haley,
Yeah.
thank you so much for taking the time
Yeah.
to share with us like all your expertise. And it's been amazing working with you so far on Right for Money and
Thank you.
Power. And like you've
Oh,
just done
Sam.
like I'm so excited to be able to like continue working with you with all this stuff. Do you
Yeah.
want to share a little bit about how if the writers who are watching now are going to watch this later, if they want to work
Yeah.
with you on their self-published book or their
Mhm.
traditionally published book, how do they get in touch with you and any other places that people can find you?
Yeah. So my website is haleyraymond.com, and there's a billion ways to spell Haley, but I spell it Haley, and Raymond, like everyone loves Raymond. My email is just haley@haleyraymond.com. So yeah, I'd love to hear from you guys. And if you do let me know that you heard from Amy, so I might give you a little extra, or you heard it on this Substack Live. But I am like an elder millennial, so I would say my Instagram is still private to me, but I am on LinkedIn. So that is where I'd say I get most of my clients from LinkedIn. I really love LinkedIn. So look me up there. It's Haley Raymond. And so, yeah, but really haleyraymond.com. See you there. But yeah, thank you so much, Amy. And thank you guys for listening. I was so excited to see so many people join. So really appreciate everyone. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. And everyone can go to amysuter.com/power for Right for Money and Power, which is the book
Yeah.
that Haley has done such a great job helping me
Oh,
launch.
thank you. Oh, well,
So
it's good.
thank
It's a good book.
No, I really appreciate it. So thank you for your time and thanks everybody for tuning
Okay.
in.
Bye. Bye, guys. Thank you.